there's a certain amount of celebrating this book and understanding its relevance really to different audiences.
Yeah, I think that it's sort of a different book because a lot of, I suppose, the problem in my life is um, reconciling creativity with commerce. And all people in the arts and theatre. It's like, yeah, this is great, it's fulfilling, it's wonderful, but where's the money? And I think both of you, John-Paul, and you kind of illustrate that sort of. They don't need to be incompatible. They are that they can you can't they are both sides need each other. Business without, I'm doing some kind of corporate presentation, and the dryness and meaninglessness of the language. They're CEOs of billion pound companies, and they talk shit, because they can't.
Yeah, no.
And like, that's because they've separated. They think there's one world which is the corporate world, and there's one world which is the kind of arty farty world, and the twain shall meet, but
Yes.
it doesn't work.
But I think again, always helpful to look around at different disciplines and learn as much as we can, integrate them. My husband talked the other day about, I think his statement was, I just need to go and architect that strategy. And I went, whoa, let me just write that down. And he said, what? And I was like, whoa, we're revisiting that later. Architect that strategy. And I remember working with somebody once who said, look, I've really limited bandwidth. I said, I just don't understand what you're saying. So I think, again, being in a position to be able to say, what does that mean? Because sometimes it happens with acronyms and you realize you're outside of the club because you're not sure what everyone's talking about. So being able to stop and ask that question, I think, it's a really important moment. But I think sometimes fear stops us from saying, well, what are you actually saying? But unless we can explain it simply, then I guess the argument is we don't know it well enough ourselves, right?
Yeah. Emperor's new clothes and all that sort of stuff
Mm.
is a problem, I think. And I did a voice session on Saturday. Matthew Collins, he sort of popped up again, and we did a Macbeth voice 3-hour sort of voice lesson. And so we lay down on the floor and did the breathing exercises and did all this sort of, did that for 20 minutes. And then we basically read through the whole of Macbeth in a kind of abridged version
Mm-hmm.
that Matthew had copied out. And we just read it. And then we went through and read particular speeches, and, each of us shared it. And nothing, he didn't really do anything, but actually, I think I became incredibly well, I've been watching it on video now, very familiar with Macbeth very quickly.
Mm.
And of course, when you start reading the language, reading it aloud, it suddenly means something that it doesn't on the page. You start understanding the speeches.
Mm.
And so I couldn't really put my finger on it, but I paid £25 and I felt very, very satisfied for what I got. And it's quite hard work, doing this on screen.
Yes, it is. But I think one of the benefits is it really builds that proprioception, that feeling of what's happening in your body and in your voice and in what you're feeling. And I think that can take quite a while for actors or everyone to develop this awareness of what's happening. And I think inside the coaching space, it's much quicker for us as coaches to be able to place a hand on your shoulder and say, there, can you feel this? Or listen to this? Or, oh, can you see how my belly's moving in this breath? And I think as much as this isn't a substitute for ever being in the room with people, in any aspect, I think, of the work, that there becomes a bit more autonomy, I think, with this distance. So as long as you have the space to develop, I think, that self-awareness and encourage that in somebody else, create, those pauses, those moments of silence to say, well, what are you noticing? And it's okay to say, I'm not sure, but what's happening? Tell me. Then we start having to place that power back with the other person, which is where it should be. But I think sometimes, particularly if you don't have those 3 years of actor training, to develop that self-awareness, and you've got these quick sessions and these people that need goals and they need to know what to do next, then I think having that space to just say, well, what's that about? It just starts opening the conversation in a much deeper way.
Okay, yeah. If you're a top actor, is it like, will you spend sort of half an hour a day practicing voice, you're exercising your voice?
It depends. It depends. Hey, I think again, if you're a top actor, such a big, such a big loaded question, right? Again, what I would say is, I mean, I think that there's a common held belief that it takes somewhere between 3 to 5 years to train your voice. So that means when you come out of drama school, your voice isn't fully trained for some people. And for me, certainly, it took me partway through my master's in voice to actually go, oh, okay, now I understand some of this. Now I'm getting it. So I would say it's something, it's like any sort of fitness or physical movement. You've got to keep it up. It just depends really, I guess, on how you do it. And so I think for some actors, then yes, they regularly will take time to do a big voice warm up, or go on top up classes, or workshops. And I think I'm a fan of integrating it. So saying, sing in the shower, go for a run and hum. If you've got young kids, do these exercises, do some tongue stretching exercises while they're in the bath. So finding ways to make it work for you, rather than saying one size fits all. Because again, this is all lifelong lessons, whether you're training for a career on the stage, or you're wanting to get to develop your presentation style and be a bit more interesting.
Okay. So are you doing any slides or anything like that?
No, I wasn't going to. I was gonna.
Okay, I'm just wondering if we need to do it. JP's just come through.
Okay.
Hi, John-Paul. Do you need to show any slides or do any technical stuff?
I'll get one slide just in case, but that will be it.
Do I need to authorize you as a person or something?
You might need to. Let me see if I can share my screen now. I appear to be allowed to, so that should be okay.
Okay. I've got people in the waiting room now. Shall I let people in?
Yes, I was going to ask. Is there a whiteboard function?
There seems to be, yes.
How does that work? I'm not
on share screen.
Perfect. So if we did need to use a whiteboard, John-Paul, I could ask you.
Does that work? Can you see that?
Lovely. Oh,
great.
It's a giant turd.
Right, shall I let people in now?
Yes.
By all means. Thank you.
So you okay, John-Paul? You
yeah, very well.
Sunshine? Is it sun shining in London?
It does look very nice out there. Yeah, it's very cold though.
Okay.
And it looks like it's very bright where you are. Where are you, Lucinda?
I'm West Sussex.
Yep. Oh, okay. And Brian, I know where you are.
Okay. Hi, Andrew. Hi, Pauline. Hi, Maria.
Hi, how are you? Hello, everyone.
Hello, Maria. Yes, I'm good. I'm good. Enjoying the arrival of spring.
Yes, I managed to have a haircut.
Very good. And John-Paul, have you had any more kind of gigs for this book?
Yeah, I had a very nice chat with a group of psychotherapists last week. No, on Monday.
Okay.
Yeah, they're very keen to be able to talk about what they do, which they normally think they're not allowed to do. If that makes sense.
Well, presumably they'd be quite good, because I think sort of local psychotherapy is just about creating good personal stories, re-editing other people's stories to a certain extent.
I think what that does is, from what I could understand of what they were saying they struggle with, is a sense of it all being about other people's stories, and I don't really have anything to say.
Okay.
But it's one of those classic things, isn't it, that it's very easy to see what someone could do and they'd be really good at it, and then how do you do it for yourself?
But are there boundaries, John-Paul, though? So for them, they're not really able to self-disclose or self-reveal. And I think, like particularly in your book, there's so much of yourself and so much of your stories that they feel potentially quite boundaried about bringing
I
up.
think they worry about looking like they're human as well, because some kinds of therapy, it's all like be the mask.
And also, I'm quite interested in this sort of, is psychotherapy, it's a medical thing. You do a medical degree to become a psychotherapist, do you, or not? No.
Not psychotherapy, psychiatry, yes, but psychotherapy, you do a lot of training, but I don't think you have to be medically qualified. Hello, Craig, Patrick, Pauline, Maria, Andrew, Kathleen, Carol, and Woodso.
Who's Woodso? I don't know. We can't see.
Don't think you've sneaked in and I haven't noticed that you're there.
I'm hopeful Woodso is a collection of abstract pictures.
All right.
Hello, Kathleen. Thanks for your message.
Okay.
Hello, iPhone.
So do you get regular updates about how the book's doing and
No, the trouble with publishing is that it's got such long lead times up to the point of publishing and then afterwards, because often they only know how many they've sold if the bookshop either returns them because they're not selling or because they order some new ones. So it could be months. They're in a bookshop. They might have been sold, they might not have been sold. They might not have reordered even though they've sold. So you don't get your numbers for months.
But presumably bookshops aren't open. That's a terribly frustrating thing for somebody who's published a book, isn't it?
It is, but my agent is quite keen to persuade the bookshops that it's as if time has been on hold and we can start now.
Okay.
And he's a very persuasive chap, so you never know. Hello, Fiona and Angel, or Angel, and Colin, hello. And Carol. I don't think I said hello to Carol.
Okay. I think I'd like to start. I'd like to do the introduction, if that's okay. Everybody ready? Okay, so I'm very pleased to welcome you today to a conversation between Lucinda Worlock, a voice and communication coach, and John-Paul Flintoff, a journalist, writer, and performer, and the author of a modest book about how to make an adequate speech. A book that appeared just over a month ago and has already got 16 5-star reviews on Amazon. I've brought these two people together today because they represent something I believe in very strongly. Lucinda works for RADA Business, which is where people take their theatre training and bring it into a commercial environment to share skills and insights. And John-Paul has been a journalist at the hardcore commercial end of journalism, working for the Financial Times and the Sunday Times. But he's also an evangelist for improv, an illustrator, and what I'd call a 21st century pilgrim, someone who seeks spiritual truths in unusual places. I hope their conversation today will reveal, as this book does, that creativity is not separate from commerce, vision isn't separate from voice, and how we can all cultivate our own talents at whatever level, and they can all lead to fulfillment and achievement. So round of applause for Lucinda and John-Paul.
Thank you, Brian. I'm going to jump straight in. And what I want to do, first of all, is welcome all of you, all of the audience. My goal over the next, I guess, 30 minutes really is to ask John-Paul lots of questions about his book and about the spark, the ideas that that prompted him to put pen to paper. But I'd also like to give some space for you all to ask your questions and to have your voices heard. I'm anticipating the structure to be that we speak first and then we ask you lots of questions or ask you to share your questions. But this is, as always, an informal conversation. I am not an interviewer. Ironically, I'm a non-interviewer interviewing an interviewer today, but I'm hoping to do it in a dialogue that welcomes you all to the space. So please, if there's any burning questions, give us a wave or use the chat function. Otherwise, I will make an actual note now to stop speaking and stop listening at whatever it is, 11:30. At least 11:30, and give you some time to ask some questions. Okay. Any questions before we start? John-Paul, yes.
I have a question. I just do love to see audiences. So unless you're sort of naked and can't bear it, can we just say hello and just like, hello, Jessica. Hello, Andrew. I don't know if I said hello, Matt. I don't remember saying hello, Matt, but if I did, anyway, hello again, Matt. Hello, Fiona, Kathleen, Carol, and hello, Woodso. I don't believe that's your name, but hello anyway. If it is your name, forgive me. Hi, Carol in New York, still pre-coffee. You stay as you are. I just like to say hello, and if you want to clock off and go back onto black screens, that's absolutely understood. But I do love to know that there's a human being behind the black rectangle. Thank you. Sorry for that little interruption, Lucinda.
No, not at all. I think I'm much more in my comfort zone when I'm hearing everyone else speak than myself. And so it's great to see lots of different faces. Can I ask, where are you all from? Can we just do a quick 1 minute round the table, as it were? So I'm Lucinda, and I am here in my spare room / office in West Sussex. John-Paul, where are you?
I am going to type where I am into my name, which is John-Paul in London.
Lovely. I'm liking that as an offer. Please, Woodso, hello, who are you? Where are you?
Una Woods.
It's Una. It's my work computer, so it just comes up with my work alias. I'm in Ottawa. It's really early.
Okay. Well, look, congratulations for being with us so early in the morning. Also late at night if you have stayed up. Okay. Craig, hi, where are you? Oh, that immortal phrase. You're on mute, Craig.
So I thought I'd be pressing the space button in a professional manner there to unmute it, but missed hopelessly. So I'm in Altrincham, South Manchester, waiting for the kids to storm into the room. Okay. Which you beautifully handled on your last event with Brian. So
yes.
I'll be trying to do that.
Great. Well, look, it's always an open space. The more the merrier. Hey? Patrick, hello.
Hi, everyone. I'm Patrick. I'm sitting in my home office in Germany, close to Frankfurt.
Fantastic. Welcome. Pauline.
Hi, everyone. I'm Pauline, and I'm from Holland. And I'm in our holiday home at the moment, out in the woods somewhere. And I'm a presentation coach and would-be speechwriter. So that's why I'm here.
Fantastic. Well, you're very welcome. Thanks, Pauline. Maria.
Yes, hello. Hello, everyone. I am Maria de Bonis. I am based in central London near Marylebone Road. And this is just prior to going for lunch with friends. So I am quite excited.
Okay. Yes, I can imagine. Well, I hope that we are some sort of an aperitif en road to see your friends.
Yes.
Welcome.
Angel.
Angel?
Oh, hi. Yes, so Angel Gurria. I'm bunking off work, and I'm in Cambridge in my little home office.
Fantastic. Well, look, welcome, Angel, and I hope this is a good welcome respite from your inbox. Matt, hello.
Morning, all. My name's Matt Greenoff. I'm in Cardiff, in sunny blue skies. It's always sunny in Wales, clearly. In fact, it's not. The reason I'm distressed by looking over my shoulder, having sat here for the first time this spring, that I need to do some serious work on my hanging basket, which is dying behind me. But yeah, really looking forward to this morning's session. Morning, all.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Thank you. Colin, hello.
Hello, good morning. My name's Colin, and I'm coming here from the global corporate headquarters of Presentation Works Limited in Norwich in Norfolk, and we haven't got any of your sun, Matt, so send some this way. That would be appreciated.
Thank you. Thanks, Colin. You're very welcome. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, morning everybody. I'm actually in sunny Ripon, North Yorkshire, in my office opposite the cathedral.
Lovely. Hello, Stuart.
Hello, I'm coming from just outside Boston, so it's very early in the morning here. I'm doing my best to wake up as we speak. Lovely to be here, though. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stuart, for joining us. Thank you. Fiona.
Morning, I'm joining you today from Cheltenham and I'm working from home next to the dog.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Fiona. And hello, dog. Jessica, hello.
Hi, everyone. I'm from my sunny office in North London.
Fantastic.
Good to be here.
Near me.
Thanks, Jessica. And we've got Carol in New York, and Kathleen, I think, and Fiona.
Kathleen's in London.
Okay.
Good morning. It's not clear whether it's going to be a sunny day in New York yet or not. So good morning to everybody.
Hi, Carol. You're very welcome. Brian, where are you? I forgot to mention you. Sorry.
Brian, I'm lip reading. Brian said I'm in Bournemouth.
I'm in Bournemouth, yeah.
and thank you for so beautifully showcasing, crime one that we do as speech makers when the audience can't hear us. I think that's included everyone. Have I missed anyone? No? Well, look, you're all very welcome, and thank you for giving voice to these faces that we can see in front of us. Again, this last year has taught us that this is no substitute for being in the room with humans and having real, meaningful connections, but it's better than nothing. And actually, there is a way to make sure that we are hearing and seeing and feeling present with each other. So thank you for taking that time and space. John-Paul, I want to jump straight into the book and first of all say thank you. It was such a treat to me, first of all, to be invited to speak to you, but also to be gently nudged into remembering to read the book and then be able to ask you questions on it. It felt to me very much, and I know I said the same to Brian, but like a long conversation with an old friend. It was a very quick read. I raced through it, and I felt I felt reassured. There was not one whisper of parent-child, master-pupil. It was not an exercise in ego or prescriptivism. It was a collection of personal stories, of informal advice and anecdotes and wisdom, all spoken in a friendly voice. And it was a friendly voice that doesn't shout, "Hey!" like, oh, that's an inopportune timing for my phone to start going off. It was a friendly voice that didn't shout, "Hey, look what I know," but more, "Come here to me while I tell you what I'm learning, and what I've learned." And I find that always a really interesting place to start. It's kind, it's refreshing, it's honest. And so thank you, I think, first of all, thank you.
Thank you. Very kind of you to say so.
It's a nourishing book. And I think for a book that's structure, that is built really upon these 5 tenets of rhetoric, it seemed to me that so much of your personal story that you weave throughout was very much born out of rhetorical situations. I think namely that of kairos, right? Of adapting and taking advantage of changing circumstances. And so for me, its message feels particularly poignant to today's audiences as we emerge, some of us, particularly those of us in the UK, from this 3rd lockdown, still arguably at a time of huge uncertainty and fear. Many of us who've spent the last 13 months adapting, learning and unlearning ways of being and connecting with each other, but also ourselves. So it felt really an opportune time to pick the book up with questions that maybe I hadn't fully formed in my mind. And so my question, I guess, is when did you start writing it? And what was the inspiration? What was that inventio, that spark that made you pick your pen up and start writing?
Well, as you know, the book does mention the fact that I had a breakdown in 2018, and it felt like everything had stopped. I was starting from scratch. I was a hopeless person. I knew nothing. And there was a very real sense in which it felt like I was starting everything again. And I wondered, I mean, when it was very early days, I wondered if I could even make it to the pharmacy and collect my medication. So the idea of going and doing a talk ought to have been very difficult, but I realized I actually found it really easy. Partly because I looked at the audience and I thought, you're not as scary as going to the psychiatric hospital. So that was one thing. But the other thing was that it made me see everything afresh again also. And it made me see that I can say things that are useful to people, and it can also be healing. So I'm very keen for the book to put across, not healing in a touchy-feely, too sensitive stuff, but I think there's really something wonderful about human beings talking to each other about stuff that matters to them. It can be funny stuff, it doesn't have to be all grave and sort of, you know, I've already introduced a sort of a bit of a lowering of the energy mood by talking about psychiatric hospital, but that was a while ago, and I still like making jokes. And so I think human connection between people when we're being honest and open and authentic is just priceless. So anything I could do to put that across would be great. I made a friend who happened to be a literary agent, but I already had a literary agent, and I knew him as a friend. And he kept saying, oh, you should write a book about public speaking. And it kind of made me want to vomit, because what I heard was, you should write a book about being a great big bullshitter and manipulating people into giving you lots of money. That's not what he said. But I said, I would hate one of those. I'd hate to write one of those books, bullshitters guides, excuse my mild bad language. And so he said, well, don't write that then. And I said, well, I'll write it if I'm allowed to call it a modest book about how to make an adequate speech, which I thought was going to put him off. But he said, yeah, no, that's a good idea. There's definitely a space for that. And I thought, okay. And I thought, yeah, there really is kind of a space for that, because adequate is good enough, and good enough is good enough. But we live in hyperbolic times when you've got to be super awesome, amazing, like the top best TED speaker ever. And I just don't believe that. I don't believe that. I've seen so many examples of people doing it all wrong, and it still can work. I think there's not a single thing that they say you should do that you can't not do, and it'll still be good. You can probably not do it all wrong, but you can do lots of different bits wrong and still be good. But I don't think you should aim to do it all wrong. That would be very bold.
Thank you for the caution. And can I ask, what is it about writing particularly that helps you to open up and connect with other people?
I suppose, gosh, that's a good question. I suppose probably from having been very shy when I was young, it's easier to sort of confess to the page, to look at myself and think about things as a writer. But I'm not shy now. The thing is, you can't be a journalist and be shy. You just got to go and talk to people and ask them stuff and be a bit. And so I'm just not troubled by that. But I have got a lifetime of experience of being a journalist and writing fast and having a reasonably good sense of what pulls people in and what keeps people, which I think really matters also to a speaker. And the classic thing in journalism, I was mostly writing magazine stories, and the classic thing is nobody has to read your magazine story, so you have to come up with something that will keep them reading. And so I just stumbled into thinking about the use of what I have seen described as basically cliffhangers, the sort of soap opera effect. So you tell people, I'm going to tell you about this amazing thing, or you just let it slip. You just let slip some amazing thing, and then everyone's going, oh, I want to know what that is. And before you reveal what that is, you introduce a new, and I'll have to tell you about this. So before you take the first hook out of the fish, you've already put a new hook into the fish. So you don't let all the hooks out until the very end, otherwise they drift off.
Yes, and which you did beautifully with your story about the conference in Puebla. And it was so funny because I read it like over and over about this conference, going, I'm neurodivergent, so it was a classic tool for me to go, hang on, I need to keep reading what's happened.
Sorry
And then
about
I
that.
sort of let it go and then came back to it and then looked at the menu and was like, oh, I see, this is a strategy, this is a tool. But it was, again, it was lovely to feel that journey and to see that connection. And can I ask, how do you decide which stories to share? And I'm sure this must be as much a feature in your speeches as it is in the stories, because I think the value, I know we've spoken about this before, but for me, the value with self-revelation is it breaks down that fourth wall. And I think particularly if you're someone that seemed to be in the dominant group and you're working with people outside of that group, it helps to break down some of those, I guess, the fear, the cynicism that we might have about, well, you know, what do you know anyway about the challenges of standing up in front of an audience? I'm sure everyone always listens to you. And
Yeah. Well, that's a really good point. I am increasingly aware, the more that, you know, I am going one day to be a dead white male, and I'm currently a middle-aged white male, and as I get more and more middle-aged, and then beyond that, I'm conscious that people might look at me and think, oh, he's like the patriarchy or something, and I just think I'm this little boy who's a bit lost. And I suspect that probably applies to a lot of people. But I'm conscious that people see me and they might think that. So one of the things I love about improv, theatrical improv, is the teaching you pick up a lot about status. And I'm not talking about what it says on your job title or whether you were born a duke. I'm talking about the moment by moment status in interactions. And when you're high status, people generally do what you want, but they don't like you very much. And when you're low status, they love you, but they never do what you want. So you need to weave between the two things. And you'll notice, because I love getting a bit meta about what's going on, if you're here, you will have read what Brian wrote about this event. And it introduced me, I think it said introverted. So it's not too intimidating already. And then Lucinda said some nice things about me and it made me seem quite gentle. And then I said that I'd had a breakdown. So I have done a lot to, you have witnessed, in either noticing it or not, you have witnessed a lot of lowering of status, which makes me a bit more likable. Because if I just come in and said, yes, I'm now going to tell you how to do speeches properly, now sit down and be quiet, then that would have a lowering effect. But you might sit down and be quiet, because if I said it with enough command in my voice, I would be that. Does that answer your question?
I mean, it might have done. I just thought it was quite an interesting circular conversation. Yes, I will say yes.
Well, if someone doesn't think it does, by all means, pop a type into the box, and we'll keep an eye on that.
I think it's for you about saying that it's picking what you talk about and how you connect with audiences. I guess my question was more around how do you decide which stories to tell and which to leave out? Because again, this conversation around disclosure and appropriate disclosure, and how do you make an audience feel safe and connected to what you're saying and not, you know,
right,
uncomfortable.
So the choice, I didn't answer about the choice of topic. That was very delicate and kind of you to say it that way. Yes, no, I think I could have answered more on that. So I think that what I have increasingly learned to do is trust my intuition. This is a story that I think will be really cool. Is that good? Oh yeah, I like that one. And it might be that it's a story that makes me feel very uncomfortable. And that's usually probably a good sign, because it's going to have people somewhat sit up. If it's really not making me feel uncomfortable, it's probably boring to me. And as we all know, that transmits to the audience, that the boredom is infectious. So if it feels exciting, which is the other side of the coin of fear, I mean, excitement and fear are indivisible, then it's probably a good sign.
Okay. And can I ask, I guess before, because I want to ask so many questions around this area of, I guess, normalizing failure and repositioning this word adequate, which I think is such an important and democratizing approach to take, particularly in the world of speaking. You know, I think as soon as we assign it public speaking, then it gets all nervous and worrying. But before I do that, I don't want to forget to ask the question that which is something that's just beyond me. I'm not a writer. I speak, I listen, I train actors. And so I'm always fascinated by people that do things that I think, oh, I don't even know how I would even begin. So can you tell us a little bit about the process of crafting the book? Because as I said, it read to me like a conversation. So I'm really interested in how you write books versus how you write speeches, and whether that's a similar or a different process. Do you start at the beginning and the end? Where do pictures and mind maps come in?
Great question. I would say that my approach to both is almost identical. I want to have an audience in mind. When I was writing for the Sunday Times, I always used to think, would this work for my wife's great aunt Peggy, who was about 100 and not particularly educated, but very bright and had a good sense of humor? Would she make sense of it, and would it be mildly interesting? And also, would my then about 9 or 10-year-old daughter understand it and find it moderately interesting? So if I could theoretically have them in mind as a model audience, they were nothing like my editor. Of course, in the back of my mind, I was also thinking about my editor's personality and the fact that my editor had to pass it to her editor, who was quite intimidating. So I'm thinking about the audience. And if you're addressing that particular audience, so this audience right here, partly in Cardiff, partly in Ottawa, and other places, I'm not going to name all of them, but then I can go, oh, right, this is who I'm talking to. I find it really hard to write or talk if I have no idea about anybody. That's just almost impossible. So then I think about all the stories that are most interesting. And with this friend who then in fact became my agent, I wrote the proposal was substantially about the thing that you mentioned, the thing that went wrong in Mexico. And I wrote it in a very chatty way to my friend Jamie. And I also did the sort of the kind of workaday stuff about writing the chapter breakdown and what kind of a market it is, and those sort of professional things. But the fun of it was what sold the book. He says it just felt like a great fun, entertaining, touching, all those nice sorts of things that you sort of said as well. And he passed it on to the editor who bought it. And so I think there's something just about being heartfelt, whatever that is. What's in your heart? And again, I know that can sound quite soppy in some contexts, but it's just, do not be only in your head. Do not be only too analytical. What do you really want to get across? What do you want to be the effect on this audience? And that was one of the best things that anyone ever told me when I started doing talks, having been only a writing journalist and an author. My friend Steve said, just find out from the person who gets you in, what do they want to be the effect on the audience? Do you want them to sort of start a revolution? Do you want them just to have a laugh? And once I think about that, then I'm a little bit clearer. So I must confess that I'm not all that clear what effect this audience would like to have. I'm not quite sure what you want to get out of this, but it is a conversation. And Brian asked, and it's also important to resign oneself to never entirely knowing what people want, and often they don't know themselves.
Yes, and I think it's so interesting to see the parallels there in terms of how we train actors and this idea of intention-led communication, because I think for so many people, one of the biggest fears of getting up and standing up in front of people, or even having a Zoom call like this, because I think there's still that little feeling of adrenaline, of nerves, but it's the being in front of someone else and thinking, well, what will they think? And one of the things I often focus in on when I'm working with, whether it's actors or business professionals, is this idea of letting go of what people think. And you cover this beautifully in your conversations around perceptions, because it's, first of all, it's none of our business what people think. So get over it and just get on with it and do what you're there to do, because the audience doesn't care. We're there to serve you. We're there to make you feel something, to take you on that pathos journey. But I think as well, relinquishing some of that control, that recognizing that actually, as soon as I'm up in front of an audience, then, your cultural experiences of your life will shape how you see and hear me, and whether you're even in a mood to be receptive to listening to who I am. And I think it's a really important part of public speaking training or voice training, because when we think about voice and its relationship to identity, and then how that intersects with power and perceived power, yeah, it's murky. And I was really grateful for the fact that you didn't skip over that, because for me, I think that's one of the challenges I have with sometimes with reading books around the world of voice and communication, because it's often written in that big booming guru voice that says it's this. And I think as soon as we connect it to commercialism, then it's, you know, it's like those online marketing gurus, right? The 5 bean snake oil approach, which again, like, who do we impoverish when we start pretending to empower people with those very quick fix blanket statements, often all grown out of bias, out of a really, you know, a very unequal way to educate.
I so get that, and it's also just really complicated. I'm now finding, because I like teaching people this, I love it. I love seeing people feel empowered, but it's quite hard for me to get any work, I think, because I find it really hard to sort of market myself. Oh yeah, I wrote this book, it's called an adequate book. It's like, I ought to go in and say, I'm going to make your people amazing. And because that's kind of what they want to get their budget clear. You know, it's like, we can't get this bloke in who's average. So I think I've shot myself in the foot, but I quite like it in a way. But it's, you know, it is what it is. But I'll keep trying. I'm sure someone will want to be an adequate speaker.
I think honestly, I think it's been very resonant, and I think the fact that you have already a group of people listening and reading your book suggests that it has touched many nerves. Can I ask one of the things, one of the lessons that you have unlearned over the years about the world of about public speaking?
What are the lessons?
One of the lessons that you've unlearned, because
a
lot of it's a journey and a discovery. So what have you had to unlearn?
I think when it comes to unlearning, it's really a lot about not trying to be good. That goes against everything that we are brought up with. I just got a text from my daughter saying she's finished her exam, and bless her, she's right in the thick of all that time when everyone's being told you have to be right, you have to be correct, you have to do it this way, and you have to be good. And it's a lifetime to unlearn that you can, you might well be good, but aiming to be good can be really difficult. So how can I be of service to these people in this occasion is much more helpful to me. It takes the focus off me as well. So learning to think about them, not am I being good? If I'm thinking I am being good, that's just as bad as thinking I'm not being good. Mustn't think about me. And what that means is if I think I'm thinking about them, then I'm not worrying about the fact that I haven't brushed my hair today. I know that I haven't because I looked in the mirror on the way up to my desk. Sorry about that. But I never brushed my hair, so what am I apologizing for? The thing is, I did learn, and you said it a moment ago, actually, this thing about not minding what they think. I had this revelatory experience. I mean, it wasn't so much an unlearning, which is what you asked, but I had an absolute revelation when I did this workshop for people, and it was called How to Be Confident. Now, this is in the book a little bit. It's called How to Be Confident. So bear in mind, obviously, the people who turn up at a class like that are not going to be the most confident, because like, why would they be there? So I go in, I've done the class several times, and I just had this idea just before going in on this particular day. I thought, I know, I'm going to do this experiment. So I went in and I said, hello, welcome. Just want to tell you, you've come to the right class. You know, I know about this stuff. Something like that. I think I more or less said exactly that. And then I said, time out. Like, we've hardly started, but I said, time out. And I went, I'm going to ask you a question now. I want you just to answer honestly. There's no hard feelings. Say whatever you want to say. And they looked a bit like, oh shit, I've got to say something. But anyway, yeah, because these were not very confident people. And I said, look, it'll be fine. I was probably lowering my status a lot, going like that sort of thing, you know, funny body tics and anything to make myself less intimidating. Whatever I was doing. No, I wasn't being, no, that would be silly. But I was just trying to be very, very open and friendly and accessible. And I said, I just want to know what you think of the man who said what I just said, me. And obviously no one put their hands up for a while because they weren't very confident. And then eventually some people got the confidence to put their hand up, which was like a big win already. And they said things like, oh, I'm really pleased, I haven't wasted my money, I'm not wasting my time, all polite, nice things. And then I said, and I don't know where this idea came from, it just popped into my head. And then I said, well, that's great, thank you very much for that. I'm not going to get too attached to the fact that you're pleased, because there might be some people who feel differently. So I just want to hear if there's anyone else who felt at all differently or anything. I think a little thing coming back to what you said, maybe, and maybe what we were talking about with gender and sort of what people might expect of you. It happens to be the case that nearly everyone in this class was female, but there was one bloke and he was sitting at the back. And eventually he put his hand up and he said, well, actually, I thought you were a bit of an arrogant wanker. Or twat. He said, I thought you were a bit of an arrogant twat. And I said, okay, thanks very much. I'm not going to get attached to that, but I'm really grateful for your honesty. That's really good to know. And it was like, lightning flash revelation. I thought, they've all seen exactly the same person. Some of them think, this is great, I'm in safe hands. One guy thinks you're an arrogant twat. It's all about them. It's really not about me. So whatever I say will be seen by different people differently. So I might as well just not mind about that. I mean, there's no way of forcing anything. By the end of the class, the ones who were pleased might have been really disappointed, and he might have thought I was marvelous. I have no idea. I can't control that. I can just do my best.
Mm-hmm.
That was my biggest moment of revelation in talking.
Yes, and I loved Arrogant Twat chapter. I thought it was hysterical, and I think a good reminder of us to stay humble, but also to let go of some of that control, because I think for many of us, again, depending on, I guess I can only speak for myself. So I think we, particularly those of us that have come through the journey of being actors and then working in creative industries and connecting with the world of business, there is, I think, a huge amount of pressure on us to evolve and flex and adapt. And I think it's what we often say to speakers, you know, how do you adapt and speak the language of your audience so that they hear you? And I think the lower, I know Brene Brown, your great pal, it was great to hear about Brene Brown throughout your book, actually, because so much of your book was vulnerable and courageous and compassionate. And I'm really glad to hear all of that language starting to evolve in the world of leadership and everyday communication. But this idea of, what was my thread? This idea of
coming up through the artistic and
yes,
working in.
And just being a chameleon. And at some point you sort of have to stop and go, hang on a second, who am I in this space?
Yeah.
What is my authentic self? Because I think when you're so used to doing things differently and it always evolving to connect to different audiences, it can be really hard sometimes to then be present in who you are.
Yeah.
And then connecting with your objective and, you know, setting and playing your intention and taking your audience on this journey.
Yeah.
And I think that's what can pull people sometimes towards this very performative, bluff, you know, way of, yes.
Can I, at this point, can I show one of those drawings that I was going to show? Because it's exactly about this. It's a supposedly scientific graph, which I think I put in the book.
Mm-hmm.
So the point is that if the speaker only cares about pleasing themselves, they're making an awful speech. If they care about the audience and are true to themselves, they're making a great speech. And if the speaker only seeks to please the audience, they're making an awful speech again. So it's kind of it's a totally pseudo, not real graph, but it kind of trying to get the idea across that if you can be honest while also addressing the interests of the audience, then that's the sweet spot. That was just one of the many graphs that I made up when I was trying to get my head around this subject. Another one was the spectrum of communication, which didn't go in the book, only because it was too long. It's really long spectrum, but on one end of the spectrum, you've got basically sending messages into outer space for aliens who may or may not exist, may or may not be able to translate them, and may or may not care, where it's all in the control of the speaker and you say whatever you like because you don't know anything about your audience. That's one end, but it's very easy and it's very controlled. And the other end is very chaotic, where you've got, let's say, my first thought was that having a candlelit dinner with someone is the hardest, because like, but then I thought, no, saying sorry to someone who you care about on a thing that you care about. That's probably the hardest. You have no control over what's going to happen. It's very difficult to deliver the message that you want it to, and to have it received the way you want. So this sort of spectrum of communication is how well are you connected to your audience, and also how much are you making yourself vulnerable. So sending a message to aliens, arguably it makes us vulnerable because it means they'll know where to come to zap us, but that's like the limit of the vulnerability. It's not like revealing our our innermost soul. So I found it quite fun to play around with graphics. There's a really beautiful graphic. I'll try and find it somewhere and send it to Brian, and Brian, I'm sure you can forward it to people. It's a graphic that shows all sorts of wonderful things about Kairos, among other things.
No, I really enjoyed the illustrations, and I found, I know that Brian mentioned you refer to Quentin Blake, I think, in the style section, and about how he used illustrations. In those of you familiar with Roald Dahl, again, I grew up on Roald Dahl books and Revolting Rhymes and, you know, Quentin Blake's scribbles, and so it was really delicious to open your book and to have, you know, mind maps, graphs, little pictures, even little stars suggesting ends of sections. And I found the inclusion of them helped me break up the sea of words and take time to pause and visualize your thoughts and process and reflect on what you'd said. Can I ask, in the same way that I asked about what role writing plays for you in terms of opening and connecting, how does art do that for you?
I love to be able to think about things non-verbally. It takes me out of my head and it puts me back into a place where I know what I care about. And noticing the weight of the line as I'm drawing. If I'm, you know, if you imagine drawing something now in a state of mind where you are angry, your mark will be very different from drawing it in a state of mind where you're feeling carefree. The marks that you make are different, and the color choices I make are different. So drawing is just a magnificent way of being non-verbal and not too intellectual.
That's so interesting, and it reminds me so much of Laban, you know, the grandfather of movement, because again, when we talk sometimes in the world of voice about finding different weights of words and colors and brightness, and the importance, like you said, one of your recommendations was to read your friend Tarzine Ahmad's speech out loud, that, you know, language doesn't live in your head, it lives in the body. You need to move, you need to get up. And I think a lot of work around the world of actor training is, you know, in creating either imaginary art pictures or actually writing them out, drawing them out, visualizing. So it's really helpful to know that for you that was both part of how you process thoughts, but part of that, you know, another layer of messaging that you're sending to your audience.
You mentioned Quentin Blake, who used to physically embody characters before he drew them. So he would think, if I'm going to be a sword rapier thrust, I have to do it with my body. And that's another thing I find really wonderful about drawing, is it brings me back into the body to try to do that. Thank you. Thank you.
I didn't know that. That's really interesting to hear. I'm mindful of time and looking at my long list of questions. I went from some very messy looking attempts at mind maps to then just seas of questions that I might ask depending on the conversation. And I guess coming up towards the 11:30 mark, which is my golden hour of asking other people to please share their questions, I wanted to ask you a question about, I guess, as a journalist, because I think as a journalist, I imagine you're reading people all the time. And there's a lot of research that goes into your articles. And again, one of the things I got from this book, because a lot of my work is really around the 5th chapter, delivery and ethos. And obviously there still needs to be those whole who, what, how questions. But I'm often working with people to give voice to a speech they've already written. And although I might need to edit it and, you know, play around with some of the style or the structure, essentially they've done it before I meet them. So I'm interested in this idea of, I guess, you as a journalist, and you're always reading people and taking a certain amount of information from them. And I wonder if that's a double-edged sword for you when you stand in front of an audience.
Oh, in what sense?
I think if you're highly emotionally intelligent and you are a high empath, then you're always reading non-verbal
I see.
about people. And I think when you stand up in front of a stage, you know, or on a Zoom call like this, and you're looking for proof of engagement, and you're looking to find who's processing what I'm saying, how's this going, am I reaching my objective, that sometimes I think we can become even more acutely aware of what people are thinking. not in a sort
Yeah,
of
I think that's true. But I have found that one of the things that helps is to be a gentle observer of myself observing. So to try to think, well, I mean, if I do try to draw attention to what's actually happening right this second and not to draw any conclusions about it. I know that we missed Colin because he's left, so I'm keeping an eye on that, and I saw that in the chat, and I noticed that Craig had made a comment, but Craig has just temporarily left his chair. So I'm watching and keeping an eye on things, but I have to try to not get too tangled up in, oh, do they like me, or any of those sorts of thoughts, by just going, oh, John Paul's still watching, that's good, he's doing his job. So just keep an eye on it, but don't be too tangled up in what that means. So yes, it's really important to watch the audience and to draw attention to it sometimes. So if everyone was asleep, I would, you know, I wouldn't wake them up. But if there are one or two people still awake, then I'd say, I'll keep my voice down because I noticed that lots of people have fallen asleep or something. So try to name that thing which often we run away from saying because it's embarrassing or we think we've failed or something. Just be honest about the fact that, well, actually, you know, we missed Colin. I'm sorry about that. But there we are. I'm not going to pretend that we didn't.
Mm-hmm. And how much of that has been something that's evolved for you over time, or is that something that you very much bring from the world of improvisation?
Yes, because in improv, anything that happens is an opportunity for you to create something. Mm-hmm. And once you get that mindset, you go, God, this is brilliant. Like I've got to do a class. I'm teaching how to write in a course for some people, and I thought, how am I going to do that? And I thought, well, I'll just use their writing as a sample. I was like, of course, that makes total sense. Like,
yes.
But they hadn't asked that. I mean, it seems so obvious now I say it to you like that, but I was thinking, what will I use? What will I use? As of the whole wide world, we'll just use what's on your desk.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting actually how much the crossover of improvisation, I think, and therapy can be, because it all rests on that implicit promise, right, of the yes and, that your offer will be accepted without judgment. And so we start creating this very collaborative, open world.
Yes.
There's nothing to fail. And it struck me throughout the book how much that message, you know, is really, you really ring it home. And I think it is such a useful reminder, I think, for us in this world of increasingly what feels almost like curated perfection, of being really surrounded by messages that tell us how we're perceived on the outside is much more important than what we experience on the inside.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes the world of those airport books do a lot of potential harm by suggesting that there is one clear way to do it, one very impressive way to stand in front of an audience and sell them something. Yeah. So what I really appreciated was actually how much of yourself you shared with us, and how you were able to pull or draw from some of those greats, mostly the Greeks, but just those cornerstones of this is how you use a structure. But hey, disclaimer, it's still really messy, so be prepared to let go of anything at a moment's notice.
Yeah.
And can I ask one more question before I sit back? And that is, you dedicate your book to your little girl. Is that right, Nancy?
Yes.
And you hope for her. I think your hope is, may you always speak well.
I think you're right.
What does speaking well sound like in Nancy's voice?
I hope that she'll always be able to be true, honest, heartfelt herself, to share what she has, her talents and her insights without reservation or without feeling that that's not allowed, or and with the sensitivity that I already know she has, but I know her to sensitive to the point where she might feel held back. So I want it to be an encouraging, you are allowed to speak you thing. Not that she's particularly, I mean, with us, she doesn't hold back, but I suspect that growing into this world, she might. So that's my hope. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Thank you, John-Paul.
Thank you. Are we? What is this? Is that it, or is it more questions from other people?
I want to try give some space to everyone else's voices and questions.
Oh, thank you.
So can I ask
Please.
whether we can open this up and out? Do people have questions?
I have.
Oh, you see lots and lots. Maria, Craig, Angel, I think.
Can I be ladies first?
Please.
Yeah. More like a personal question. I was listening to some of your viewing some of your presentations on YouTube, and you mentioned about reading with your daughter Tantan in well, from different languages and translating it into English, and found that really fascinating. And my question is, do you continue doing that kind of reading, or has it stopped? Because those videos, there were some years ago.
It was a while ago, and now she reads Tintin, and because she's studying French, she watches the French Tintin videos. But I really enjoyed reading those with her, and not only translating in real time, but trying to put on an appropriate Captain Haddock or Tintin voice, or it's mind-bogglingly complicated.
And then another question I have, the improvisation started prior to you having these experiences with your daughter, or what came first?
Maybe kind of just after. Well, around about the same time, because we were playing around and making up songs and stories and recording them, and being very creative. A preteen child can be very creative, and so I mucked about, and then I just stumbled into improv. I thought it was going to be a newspaper article, and then I thought, no, this is too good. This is for me.
No, I wanted to say that I find your take on things quite different, and I haven't read the book, by the way, but the way the presentations I watched on YouTube, I really find it very interesting, and it's very refreshing, basically.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. Craig, you have a question.
Yeah, definitely got us thinking in a different way, particularly I think around the just that kind of honest, vulnerable approach, and some of the things you've been saying have made me think about a storytelling club or a community, maybe something like the Moth. I'm not sure if you've come across the Moth, but the type of way you're talking about the subject, it makes me think of storytelling club / improv club. I just wondered what you want to happen now with the book, what you want people who've read the book to go and do.
I want everyone to feel confident that they have a voice. I mean, we all do have a responsibility to listen more than speak, otherwise it can't work. But I want everyone to feel that they can speak. And I know so many people, again, coming probably mostly in creative industries, who have so much to offer, but they're too shy to have a website or to make any kind of videos. It's not like I want to watch their videos all the time, but once in a while, they'd be really good, and there'd be loads of people who would benefit from them, and people in other industries too. You need to have at least enough confidence to say what you want to get across, and if this helps you to do that haltingly, then you'll move eventually beyond the halting stage. As it happens, Brian mentioned me as a pilgrim earlier. I don't know if that was deliberate, but I'm doing an online virtual walking pilgrimage, 45 minutes a day, every weekday in April, from North London to Canterbury by Google Street View. And if people join in, then they join in. It's like we were real pilgrims. We're walking, and we go from one destination to the next, and we tell people stuff. So that's a form of my form of the Moth for this April. If you want to find out more, it's on my website, but I'm not, that's up to you. I'd love to see you, but no, I'm not dying to build an audience or anything. There's also a question from Matt, but I think Angel was.
I think Angel has one. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, John-Paul, and thanks, Lucinda, for sort of prompting so expertly. I hope John-Paul won't be embarrassed if I mention the fact that I worked for a while on staff, as I was a staff member of the FT magazine. And I remember very vividly, whenever a piece came in from John-Paul, there was this real thrill, this kind of frisson and a ripple of excitement going out among all the sub-editors who go, oh, have you read the latest lunch with the FT that John-Paul sent in? And so this sense of sort of reverence for the stuff that he was sending in. And I think also lots of sub-editors thinking, I don't want to mess with this. This is so nice. This is just perfect. Let's just leave it. So anyway, that's just a sort of a memory from some time ago. I was going to ask him about relationship to art, but Lucinda has made the exact same question. So I guess my one question for you, John-Paul, would be, we're all sort of speechwriters, and we understand that the delivery of a speech requires, it's a performance. Do you think of writing in its various sort of genres, and including speech writing, as a form of performance as well?
I really do. And can I just say that really touched me that you said that. I'm really, really chuffed. Thank you so much about the FT magazine. That really, yeah. So what was the question again? Oh yeah, is writing a form of performance? I do think it is. I think it's a lovely thing to entertain. Actually, it reminds me this morning when Nancy went off to her exam. This is quite a sort of serious exam. I said, try to entertain your examiner. Don't just think of them as some stern judge who's going to know whether you've got it all right or not. How can you be more entertaining? Delight them. And when I say delight, I don't tell jokes. You could delight them by moving them to tears. That's delighting. But like really touch them. I mean, I didn't say all of that. I just said, entertain them. But that's maybe what I would say for any writing. Thank you, Angel.
There's a question from Matt in the chat.
Yes, so, yeah, Matt. Well, shall I answer the question? Because I can see it. You're talking about the press conferences in the pandemic, and have they met the adequate mark? I think from a democratic point of view, they're not adequate. Just because the format and the accessibility and so on, I haven't seen anything that seems very adequate. I don't think that the conversation is very adequate, but of course the adequacy is entirely in the eye of the beholder. I'm not sure that the interviewing has been right. I mean, it's quite rigged against good interviewing, but it is also just a very difficult situation. So maybe that's not a deliberate, it's definitely deliberate, but it's not entirely deliberate. No, I haven't seen anything stand out, good or bad. For what it's worth, I happen not to be particularly a person. I'm not glad that we did Brexit, but we'll be all right. But one thing that I do think that Boris Johnson deserves some credit for is that phrase "oven-ready Brexit" was just such a brilliant bit of verbal persuasion. I'm not, it's not what I didn't want that argument, but I think that was a really good example. I haven't seen anything like that in any of this pandemic time. That doesn't really answer your question, I'm afraid. I think it's just so big, and I'm feeling slightly intimidated by the idea that I should have any kind of expert view on all the press conferences ever to do with the pandemic. So I know you didn't mean that in the question, but it slightly freaked me out. But nothing has landed in my head as a thing that I'm going to take away as either good or bad, really. There's another question from Patrick. Shall I read that? Or is it time up? Time up? Or shall I finish it? Finish it, okay. Thank you, Lucinda. Oh, right, okay. Not a question, just sort of sorry, I've got to go. So there we are. Sorry, Patrick.
I think, can I just say thank you? Thank you, John-Paul, for, first of all, for the book, for being so open today with us. And I think, again, this reminder of vulnerability not necessarily being a weakness. I think the more we can have conversations, the more we take some of the shame and the power out of, out of hiding the tough parts that many of us go through in our lives. And I think, again, looking back on the last year, huge reminder of the shifting consciousness that I think has happened for many of us throughout lockdown in all our different experiences and challenges and battles. And I think now more than ever before, we don't know what individual people are experiencing. And I think particularly those of us that have really felt distant from our communities and our normal coping mechanisms and our real connection with our friends or families, it's been really a really healing conversation today. And I think your book is relevant for people outside of the world of speech making. I think it's a book about being human and listening and connecting. So I would implore everyone to go out and get 2 copies and support your local bookshops. Keep one, send one to a friend that you haven't seen for a while. And
thank you. Thank you, Lucinda, for making it a very enjoyable time for me and everyone else, for being a lovely group of people to talk to. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Lucinda and John-Paul very much. We're over time. Next week, we'll be talking about humour with Cicero and Tertullian. Cicero and who was the other one? Quintilian. Cicero and Quintilian. So please do join us for more future events. Thank you very much to everybody, and see you all soon.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks.
Okay, bye.